Chris Barber just finished testifying after nearly 2 days on the stand, and it was interesting, and I had the opportunity to observe the last portion of it when he was being re-examined by his defense counsel, Diane Magus. He is a protester and organizer of Freedom Convoy 2022, and he was convicted of mischief, counseling mischief, and disobey court order. The counseling mischief charge was stayed at the Crown's request because of evidentiary and reasoning overlaps between that and the mischief conviction itself. And we learned some interesting things from the re-examination that I was able to observe. For example, Chris Barber made it clear that he had nothing to do with anything relating to the traffic plan and that he didn't even know where he was going to park coming into Ottawa. He knew of 2 staging areas. I believe Major Hills Park was one, and then there was another, and that he believed that they would have everything they would need to protest, that they would have the porta potties and anything else that might be required. And I believe this goes back to earlier when I wasn't present. The Crown asked a question concerning why didn't he tell police he was going to park on Wellington for 11 days. And I think that would be quite difficult to do if he didn't even know where he was going to park at all. And in a way, this also seems like proving a negative, right? Like, why didn't you tell the police you're going to park for 11 days? But I digress. Nonetheless, he didn't know where he was going to go, and Diane Magus followed that re-examination question up by asking him, so then you couldn't have told them how long you were going to be there for. There you go. You don't even know where you're going, right? So why didn't you tell them you were going to park there? Well, I didn't even know where there was. That's a pretty good re-examination question that kind of picks apart some of the attempted points that the Crown was trying to make, and that's the purpose, I think, of the re-examination. It's very useful, and it's very useful also to hear from the accused, but it could also be very risky, right? Because every word that you add to the record is a word that can be used against you. And we'll continue on this, and I do have to resort to notes for this, so please bear with me, because I'm just trying to make sure that all of the most important points are discussed. He can't recall and doesn't believe that he was ever told by Constable Botch, who was his PLT officer, that he was ever doing anything illegal. And the Crown had asked him earlier when I wasn't present that had he assumed he was doing something, that he was acting lawfully because of her actions, and he said, I guess yes. And Diane Magus asked him, well, what action specifically? And Mr. Barber replied, her demeanor, her willingness to engage with him, I guess, in conversations. And then the Crown objected to the scope of the re-examination, citing the rules of Brown and Dunn. And the judge made a comment that the questions weren't put to the witness at the time, Ms. Botch, by the Crown or the defense. And then Ms. Magus says that they're responding to Crown's questions. They're re-examining them, not to whatever was put to the witness. Right. And then the judge said that they're making this statement at large and not directed to any single party, which is interesting. So Chris Barber was asked if he assumed that he could keep his truck where it was, and he said yes. And then Miss Magus said, well, why did you assume that? And his answer was perfect. He said, well, because no one told me to move it until Officer Botch did. And then I guess there was oh, by the way, the truck, Big Red, the beloved truck, is a she, which is humorous. And there was some laughing in the courtroom. And it's interesting because the judge, Miss Justice Heather Perkins McVeigh, appreciates levity and is quite humorous and very particular and likes very particular uses of phrases and such. And Chris Barber is very funny. So it's really good to have him using his natural personality comes out no matter where he is. And you can see that even when he's on the stand. And it's everyone had a good laugh there, because I guess someone asked, "Oh, is it a she?" And Mr. Barber said, "Well, yes, it is. It's my baby. It's definitely a she." Lots of laughs, but very serious and very sad, I think, what's happening to Chris and everybody else, because other protesters in this country aren't treated this way, and it's blatant and it's very one-sided. Even if you can argue that the law is being applied, it's not being applied evenly, because it's not applied like this to anyone else. It's very clearly being applied to people who criticized the government and dissented, and that's trying to be crushed right now, and that's very disturbing and alarming. So the Barber never asked Constable Botch if he could have, concerning the lawfulness of the truck. And so I guess the Crown had asked him if he had ever asked Botch if the truck being there was lawful, and he said no, I guess. But at the same time, this seems like trying to prove a negative. Oh, you didn't ask the police if you could walk 5 kilometers an hour instead of 10, or so and such a thing. When shouldn't they make it clear that you shouldn't? And once Officer Botch said that he needed to move it, I believe that she did at some point say that he did do it. I mean, and there was a discussion here about the worst case move it Monday, and Barber said, he was asked, why did you say that in that way? And he said that he couldn't move it at the time because there was a lot of people there for the weekend, upwards of 100,000, his words, not mine. And that to move a semi, it's very difficult. There's a lot of visibility issues. And then the judge asked him if he asked the police to help him move it. And he said he did not. And then Diane Magus followed up by saying, well, why didn't you ask, I guess? And Barber said, well, safety issues, because he was boxed in. There were trucks in front of him and behind. And on top of that, you have to find the owners of the trucks to move one at a time. And then the judge made a comment about infamous TikTok video that Chris made of an intersection near the National Art Gallery being lonely. He said, well, you were at Big Red at the time. Well, the judge was confused, mistaken actually on this point, because he wasn't in Big Red. And then Mr. Barber explained that they had rented a pickup truck, and then the judge asked, well, were you able to get around in that pickup truck? And Barber said, yes. And the judge said, well, thank you, very sharply. Let me just go on here. And I thought that was very insightful in many different ways. The judges, I think, maybe, and this is totally speculation, saying, well, then you could have gotten around, right? I don't know. You can never read into how someone replies or asks the question or where they're going with it, because we're not mind readers. No one is. And I think that no matter what, Mr. Barber's being honest. And again, testifying is always a risk, but here he is, and he's doing this, and the defense is making a motion. I believe the motion is intended to try and halt the sentencing, but we'll find out. And I'm glad that I was able to at least be there for a little bit, because this has been such a long saga, the longest mischief trial or mischief-related trial in Canadian history, and I've covered it so extensively. So it's very important for me to try and be there as much as possible, as my health is declining and I'm approaching the need for intervention, and actually I'm awaiting that. So I have many appointments, even in just next number of weeks, and it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, for me to continue covering these cases or anything in the streets, as life is going to slow down a lot for me in many ways and get very complicated and difficult. So thanks again for all of your support over the years, everyone, and for watching these videos and sharing them and engaging and helping me do this. And I felt like it's been very impactful, and I intend to continue this and to expand and improve. And there's going to be some hiccups along the way and some challenges, but I'm going to overcome them. But this is probably going to be one of my last reports of this from the field for a while. I don't know if I'll be able to attend the sentencing hearing, for example. That's going to be in a number of months, I understand. Probably towards the middle of the summer, or maybe late June or July, possibly August. I'm not quite sure at this time. But yeah, sorry for that long aside. I have to get back onto this. At one point, Officer Botch texted Chris about the criminality of people being seen carrying supplies are subject to arrest. And I gather from how the exchange proceeded that he never replied to her about that in text. And because the Crown had asked if he responded in text and he didn't. And then Miss Magus had gone down a line here where she thought that he followed up, that he thought the Crown asked him, did he call her, and that he replied he wished. But Miss Magus had her lines crossed here, and the Crown and judge said that they didn't remember the Crown asking about a phone call, and that maybe this was something else actually. So it's interesting. And to be fair, the judge also was confused about Big Red being in that intersection when he made that TikTok video saying it's looking lonely, which I think is probably more Chris's humor and crude humor, and to be clear, rather than an intention to commit criminal acts and to fill an intersection. So, but I believe the judge believed differently. But then again, the judge also believed that he was in Big Red at the time, going on what she said today. So who knows? Mr. Barber made it clear that him and Constable Botch had a lot of conversations, both inside and outside of text, by phone call and meetings, I suppose. The judge noted that there was actually a TikTok of Barber responding to the issue with the arrests with the supplies, and that Mr. Barber seemed to not recall that TikTok, and the judge refreshed his memory by mentioning that there was someone there he was walking downtown and someone had a jerry can when he was talking about it. So that's interesting. And then the Crown objected at some point around here, saying again that they're worried about the scope of the reexamination. And then Miss Magus had went into asking him that he was asked what advice he sought from the judge from the Crown's questions earlier. And Magus asked what he believed the word advice to mean. And he clarified that he believed he was seeking legal advice from the judge. I guess this was during the sentencing, the injunction hearing during February 7th, I guess, in front of Superior Court Justice McLean. And Justice Perkins McVeigh made it clear that judges can't actually offer legal advice. And then Mr. Barber made a humorous comment about how he had learned a lot about the law over these last number of years and that he's still not quite ready to be a lawyer. He doesn't want to, and he'll stick to trucking, which was, again, his natural humor coming through. And then Miss Magus asked if Justice McLean asked him to leave, would he have? And Mr. Barber said that he would have. And I think that was a perfect way to end the reexamination. And as I understand, at that point, Justice Heather Perkins McVeigh stood him down, so he was allowed to leave the stand. He's no longer testifying. And tomorrow will be closing submissions in the motion. Now, it's reckless to speculate, but I will anyways, because why not? I don't believe the judge is going to accept the motion from the defense in this case. And as I think I might have explained earlier, but I'll clarify if I didn't, this Mr. Barber and Miss Tamara Leach are co-accused, now at this point co-convicted of these charges. And in addition, Mr. Barber was additionally charged with disobey court order, which I don't believe Miss Leach was. And Mr. Barber was solely found guilty of that offense. And Miss Leach's defense team, who is separate from Mr. Barber's defense team, Mr. Barber is represented by Miss Eunice and Miss Magus, and Miss Leach is represented by Mr. Greenspun and Mr. Eric Granger, and both have others as well, but those are the counsel that come to mind. And Miss Leach's team is not engaging in this motion. I think this is possibly as it's been described to me, to halt sentencing. So I'm not sure the formal process motion being put forward, but the closing submissions on the arguments are for this are tomorrow, and the Crown and Defense will have an opportunity. And then there will as well be written submissions as always. I believe it may be argued entirely orally, but I highly doubt that. And Miss Leach is in the body of the court observing, but again, her team's not participating in this motion. That was a great end. And thank you guys again for all your support over the years and for following and tolerating and participating. And we are all learning stuff together, aren't we? And I just wish that Canada could be more fair and that we could have more real justice. And it seems that leaders can do things, they're never held accountable. Different protesters can do things, they're not held accountable for. Pro-Palestinians were just found, not even found, it didn't even go that. They were charged with mischief, and in laying the charges, the Crown had cited reasonings from multiple cases, including R.V. King, right? The decision against Mr. Pat King concerning Freedom Convoy charges, and they were citing that, and then apparently very recently those charges against those 4 pro-Palestinians in Ottawa were dropped, the mischief charges, and all the other ones, and they were just to write a letter and pay a fine. But meanwhile, Convoy, protesters, speakers, whoever, are pursued to the ends of the world. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's justice. And I hope that we can have some changes in this country concerning that. And I look forward again to continuing my reporting, though it may look different in the years ahead. And certainly this year it's going to slow down a little bit. Thanks again. See you next time. From Ottawa, I'm Right Blend.